Let's discuss some of the risk management tools and its impact. So the first point is that the right sizing of a risk management program is very critical. So you have to take a number of decisions once you are identifying your risk management program. One of the key aspects is that whether you are following hedging as a one-off thing or is it part of the overall strategy. Of course, if you are making hedging as part of your strategy, you will have to take actions. You will have to hire the staff that can do hedging. You will have to have the systems which can be used for hedging purposes. So setting a strategy and identifying the kind of risk management program that you want to implement is the key. The second point is that financial markets are actually very dynamic. Your financial markets keep on changing. Your trends in the commodity market, in the currency market, it keeps on changing, and you have to be very proactive in managing your risk in order to stay updated with the market, in order to be relevant to the market and manage your risk well. The strategy require complex systems, and it is one of the key aspects of implementing your risk management process. The last point is that risk limits needs to be placed. So all of the risk management actually drill down to what sort of limits you have in place. Are those limits actually understood by the line managers? Are you monitoring it well? And how do we actually report it to the higher authorities, which may include the board of directors as well. Now let's talk about the right sizing of the risk management in more detail. So the first step of right sizing your risk management program is to set the right sort of risk direction. So you will be defining your risk appetite statement, you will be identifying your basic risk management goals. Let it be reducing volatility, let it be reducing the taxes that you want to pay. You may want to increase the surety that you have from the perceived risk. You may want to manage the product prices. Whatever your objectives are, you have to explain it. Then you also have to mention the accounting treatment, whether you are considering the risk management to be a cost center or a profit center. That means, do you think that risk management program is actually contributing directly to the bottom line, or you just think that it's just a cost and you won't be getting benefit out of it? And of course, the kind of mindset that you'll be building your risk management program on will decide the effectiveness of this particular program. In the end, we will be talking about the identified risk. So what are the risks which are there, which you need to be monitored? Then we will have to ensure the right sizing of the function. So we have to identify the resources that we have. We have to identify the budget. So of course, when you will be hiring people. When you will be hiring people, you will have to have expert people who have the right sort of expertise and the skill and the education to run the risk management program. You will have to implement systems, and that systems will of course come with a significant cost. So you have to identify your budget and you have to take your decisions accordingly. Then in the next step, you will be identifying the reporting lines, and you will also identifying the oversight. So you may have 3 line of defense model, where you will have your line managers, your risk managers, and your internal audit, which is ultimately responsible of ensuring risk management program on a post facto basis. You have to make sure that the independence is there. So risk management usually does not report to the CEO directly. Ideally, it reports to the board of directors or board risk committee to ensure independence. In the next step, in the right sizing, you will have to establish the right policies and procedures. You have to do all sort of documentation which will assist you in identifying and achieving this risk management program. And in the end, you will keep evaluating your performance. You will keep identifying the lapses in your methodology. You will keep monitoring the incentive compensation that you are given to your staff. You have to make sure that there is no additional risk taking behavior buy this stuff. Using these steps, you can right size your risk management program and implement a program which is more applicable to your organization. Now let's discuss some of the risk limits that are implemented in the institution. Number one is stop loss limits. So in the stop loss limit, what we do is we put a threshold on transactions. So if there is a loss of $1 billion on a particular transaction, we will just stop it. We will not be doing these sort of transactions or during that day or during that month, whatever duration of that limit is. The disadvantage of stop loss limit is that it's applicable only on realized gains. So you will able to stop only when you have actually booked losses. The second limit is notional limit. So you will put a limit on the amount of exposure that you are taking. So you may say that we will have the equity portfolio which will just be $10 million, or we will invest in the food sector only at about 5% of the portfolio, and then you will calculate the sum that 5% will be. So you put an amount of exposure on that particular limit. The only disadvantage is that this notional limit may not strongly be related to the actual risk which you are taking in that particular market. So there may be a difference. Your notional limit may just be 1% of the overall portfolio, or it may be significantly higher than the size of the portfolio. The third point is that there are some specific limits. So there are limits which are designed for special needs. For example, you may introduce limits for the dealer in the treasury. So you can say that the junior dealer will only be execute deals worth $1 million during a day. A senior dealer can do transaction of up to $5 million, and the treasurer can do transaction of up to $15 million. So based on seniority and the experience, their dealer limit would be increasing. Then we also have gap limits. So we put limit on the maturity amount. So when we talk about gap, we are talking about gap in the assets and liabilities. So there is 3 months, there is 6 months, asset is 10 million, but the liability is 12 million. So the gap is minus 2 million. So you can say that the gap in the 3-month bracket should not increase minus $1 million. If it does so, we will be managing our assets and liabilities. The only disadvantage is that it restricts that gap for a given period, but doesn't control price risk that comes in the assets and liabilities. Then we have concentration limits. We can put limits to avoid concentration. For example, the food example that we just discussed, you may say that the food sector is actually risky and we will not be investing more than 5% in the food portfolio. So you try to avoid concentrations in your portfolio, but the disadvantage is that you don't able to identify the correlations between different markets, and this limit does not represent the correlation, especially during the stressed periods. Then we have Greek limits. So options is a form of financial instruments that we use for hedging. So we have different limits introduced for different parameters. For example, we have a limit for delta, which is the change in option, a call option or a put option, which are two financial products, due to change in price in the financial markets. But in the Greek limit, we have model risk involved, because all the limits are set using model risk, and the model can be wrong, and based on the wrong assumptions, the limits would not be the correct one. Then we have value at risk. We can introduce aggregate levels limit for value at risk, both at product level, at market level, and so on and so forth. But of course, again, in the value at risk, the model risk is present, and your value at risk may not be suitable for your portfolio. In the end, we may build some limits based on stress testing. So we may introduce some hypothetical or historical scenarios using which we can identify the stress limits. Or stress limit is also applicable to other limits as well. So you can have stress limits on VAR. So for value at risk limits, you can a high limit and a medium limit. And you can also see what were the labels when there was this global financial crisis, and you use those labels to set your limits. So whatever equity losses that you may have during this particular time, you may reflect it in your limits. Now let's talk about some of the derivative contract that we have. The number one is forward contract. A forward contract is an exchange on pre-agreed quantity of the asset at a preset price. So if we have to exchange USD to euro, we may decide that after 1 month the parity would be 1.1 and the amount that we will be buying is $1,000. Forward contract is generally not regulated and over-the-counter product. On the other hand, the future contract is regulated. This is similar to forward product, but it transacted on an exchange. Then we have swap contracts. In swap contracts, we have two cash flows and we swap those cash flows. We have party A, which has a liability in USD, and we have party B, which has liability in euro, but their assets are in different currencies. So party A swap USD with euro at pre-agreed rates. Then we have put option and call options. These are the options which gives the purchaser the right but not obligation. So you have purchased that right by paying the premium, but you don't have any obligation to buy or sell the underlying asset. You will only be selling or buying it if the price are favorable for you. Then we have exotic option, which is an extension of call option and put option, where we have non-standardized option. These options are customized based on the requirement of the two parties. It's usually over-the-counter products. Then we have swaptions, where swaps and options are combined. So you're swapping, you are in a swap agreement where you are exchanging at future rate at preset price, but you don't have the right, you have the right but not the obligation to do it. So if the prices are favorable, you will be doing that transaction, but if the prices are not favorable, you will not be doing that particular transaction. So this is what we had from this chapter. Thank you.